USA versus Canada. In today's video, we're going to talk about the two countries, some of the recent developments and things going on, and how it affects the HVAC industry specific, and how it affects you, how it affects us when it comes to buying some of these products and the availability, the pricing, and so on as we go through this. One thing that I'll just note, I'm not going to get political in this video, but there are some things we need to talk about to get out of the way. And one of those things is how Canada's always been an ally of ours. Now, we're not just talking about in foreign disputes and things like that, but from a trade standpoint, there are lots of things specifically in the HVAC industry where we've always been in lockstep. So with the transition, for example, with A2L refrigerants coming in and the phase down of 410A, some of the timelines involved with that and how we've moved along with the equipment itself and the transitions, and of course, new products being introduced to either country to our markets. They've always been very similar. I've been to conferences where there were fellow Canadian friends, HVAC friends there, and we would have some of those conversations. I remember a couple of guys talking to us about how they're on the same timeline we are. I asked him, I was like, well, where are y'all with all of this? And he's like, yeah, you know, the AIM Act pretty much is our timeline as well, even though the EPA is not in our country, because the countries are tied together from a manufacturing standpoint, from a partnership in the companies themselves. A lot of companies will have branches in both countries and using the same distribution centers and all of that. That all plays a role in all of this. Now, again, I'm not going to get political, but there are some recent developments. One of those being tariffs that President Trump has introduced to the American market. And whether you do or don't think they are a good thing, the one thing that we all can agree on is it will affect pricing. It will affect pricing on many of the products that we have in our industry, among others. We're not talking about all of that. We're just simply talking about HVAC here. One of those tariffs was a specific 25% tariff on all goods imported from Canada, citing concerns over illegal immigration and drug trafficking. These measures are a part of a broader strategy to address perceived threats and protect domestic industries. The tariffs were set to take effect on March 4th of 2025, with Canada responding with imposing equivalent tariffs on US goods. Now, I'm going to put a few links down in the description of this video that I think will be helpful, especially if you want to get more information on this. But the other thing I think is interesting, especially when we're talking about these two countries, is another tariff that was put into place recently on February 10th, where Trump administration imposed a 25% tariff on steel and aluminum imports from all countries, including Canada. Now, the HVAC industry relies heavily on steel and aluminum for manufacturing components, such as ducts, units, and structural frameworks. The newly imposed tariffs have led to increased material costs, which manufacturers may pass on to consumers. Let's be honest, they will pass on to consumers, resulting in higher prices for HVAC systems and services. Now, this is all part of an escalation of sorts. We've got both sides having politicians that are arguing for or against and this and that. But one thing to point out here is there are Canadian politicians that are saying, hey, we're going to respond. We're going to fight back in some cases. I've seen some of them say on the news. And I think that's important to note. Again, not for political reasons, but for consumer reasons. Because if they retaliate, then what's to say that we don't see more tariffs that could affect pricing, among other things, including distribution and so on. I think what's interesting here is this is not one of those deals where we're talking about one country sells something specific to the other. When it comes to our industry, we've got companies that are on both sides, that they are literally having trucks go from one branch to another on certain days. And I think it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out with certain products, because some of those companies may have to decide, well, you know, from a math standpoint on what we're offering, we may need to offer this versus that, maybe have something totally different in one country versus another. And you may say, well, Josh, that's probably how it is anyway. No, I'm telling you, at these conferences I've been at, our Canadian friends, HVAC friends, have said, what you're selling, I'm selling, this is all tied in together. And I'm telling you that that could possibly change when companies decide what to do, what makes the most sense for them. But another thing I think that's not pointed out in a lot of articles when I read HVAC articles pertaining to these topics is Canada has a very different climate than we do here in the States. So just because we impose a tariff on, say, a product that makes sense in Florida, it may not even affect them whatsoever, because they're going to be like, well, you know, we don't really even offer that here anyway. We only sell products that can heat our homes really well when it gets super cold outside, things like that. But I think there are a couple other things to note here in addition to what some of these articles are saying. We've talked about in a previous video, especially where we highlighted tariffs. I'll put a link right up here at the top of the screen where you can watch that video if you would like. But one of the things we talk about in that video is how some companies have brought manufacturing here to North America, specifically here in the States. I'm sure some have done that in Canada as well, but those companies that, when all the other companies were shipping jobs overseas, getting what I call modern day slave labor, because they have all these folks in a poor country and they have them working hours on end and paying them very little. Other companies have brought manufacturing here to the States. They've created American jobs. And I think knowing that, I think may play a role in the brands you choose to support moving forward. It's always interesting to me hearing on the news when things like this happen, when tariffs are put into place. Some companies will announce, oh, well, in light of recent tariffs, we're going to build a new facility in the States. And I'm like, well, what about all the companies that already were supporting American jobs? What about those? Why aren't we highlighting more of those? And I think doing your homework, we've talked about some of them on our channel, and we did a factory tour of Daikin, which is one of the sponsors on our YouTube channel. We actually got to take cameras into their factory right in Texas. I'll put a link to that video down in the description if you want to check that out. But you see thousands of folks in that video that are making Daikin products, Daikin, Goodman, and Amana products right here in our country. And that's not to say that they don't have things they've got to import too. That's not to say that there aren't tons of companies that have stuff they've got to import, but they also support American jobs. I just think that that's important to note when some companies are doing the opposite. Another thing to note is, what does this look like long-term? Will we see, again, countermeasures? Will we see some retaliation? Will we see long-term ramifications that are not reversible? We're gonna stay on top of this. We'll continue to do more videos as more information comes out. But knowing all of that may, again, play a role in your future decision-making on what products you purchase, what that next HVAC system you buy, what you put in your home. And then finally, how will this affect incentives and rebates? We did see the Trump administration put an executive order in place to do away with the Inflation Reduction Act incentives, affecting some of those programs. But moving forward, could we see programs put in place where folks benefit from supporting American companies or Canadian companies or vice versa? So I think all of that are things that we should be watching here. Again, I'll put links to the articles mentioned down in the description of this video. What are your thoughts on this? No matter which side you're on, even if you are in Canada and happen to watch this video, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave us a comment down below. I'm hoping they get all this straightened out, because there's probably no other country on this planet that we interact with, at least personally. I just went on a vacation recently. There were folks from Canada there, and it was cool chatting with them. So leave those comments down below. If you like this video, I think you'll like this one even more. It's where I talk about why the USA hates certain mini split products and what you need to know about it. Thanks for watching. Hit that subscribe button for more HVAC tips. We'll see you next time.